want to talk about Chelsea with you, Gab. As it stands, they've earned Europa Conference League football for next season, but if City win the FA Cup, they'll get Europa League football. Are they on the up?
I mean, assuming not everybody's injured next year. When people talk about Pochettino, I've been disappointed, but if I had to give him a letter grade, I always say I would give him an incomplete because I can't judge him when he's had so many injuries this year. They spent so much money on a lot of kids. I think they're going to have financial fair play or profit and sustainability rules issues, which means, I think he's likely to have to work with the players he has. I think he's got some really, really talented player. And I think there's a lot of questions to be answered. But I think if you're Chelsea, you look at where you ended up this season and you say, all right, everybody's fit next year. I need Champions League football. And I think that has to kind of be the baseline, as well as obviously developing the players that you have. I think it's they've gotten this experiment where they basically, vacuumed up so many of the top prospects in Europe without necessarily paying attention to how much they cost. Some of them have developed. Some of them, Romeo Lavia, look at the amount of money they spent on him and the minutes he's played. So many of these guys, they just couldn't get on the pitch. So I think there's some big decisions ahead, and I think they really need to step it up next year. But for this year, I got to give Pochettino a pass for the way things are now.
What is the assessment, LME, of Manchester United, worst ever Premier League finish in 8th?
Well, for what they wanted to do, it's an F. I mean, they wanted European football, no? At the very least, they wanted Europa. That they didn't get that. Obviously, fair to say, as you mentioned, if they win the FA Cup, then things will change there. But let me just begin by saying that this is not fully Erik ten Hag's fault. I'm not blaming everything on him. Of course, he's the head coach and the manager, and there is some blame on him. Specifically, I think in the way that sometimes he blindly defends his team for things that are blatantly not happening on the pitch, and he just says them. It's a bit weird.
But if you analyze, you will see we are the most entertaining team in the Premier League.
Exactly. He does it a lot. It's very weird. It's like watching Black Mirror or something. Like you're seeing something that's not happening, and then you're listening to him talk about a game, and it's like, are we seeing the same thing, Erik? Because that's not what. And I get what he's doing, but he takes it to a level where it's just like. You're just seriously, you're like George Costanza yourself out of this. It's ridiculous. So I give Manchester United an F. Part of it is Erik ten Hag, but the other part is I think a lot of the things that happened in the summer were like the people that came in. Højlund is a very talented player, but is he what he wanted for that amount of price of money? Like, how many goals did he score? 8 in the league? Like, that's not what you needed, right? Granted, a lot of injuries, specifically Licha Martinez. Yes, he's not necessarily the most consistent, but he was offering a lot. Erik ten Hag made 14 center-back pairing changes in the season. That, to me, speaks of vulnerability, of a team that really is just vulnerable, right? So there's a lot of issues at United, and I know that Sir Jim Ratcliffe keeps going on about, like, I want steadiness, I want balance, I want consistency, I want professionalism, I want Manchester United to be back to where they are. Well, you got to show it, because the same things that Gab was talking about Chelsea, I double it this preseason. Manchester United really need to get together and figure out who they want to be. And there's a lot of spaces where they need to figure out who to replace, what to do. And if Erik ten Hag is the man next season, then I think he also has to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do to be better? So this season, I give him an F. There is opportunity. There is chance to do things this summer to fix it, but a lot needs to be done.
Sorry,
Is he
can I
the
just
man
say
next
something about
season?
Ratcliffe?
Yes.
That you mentioned him there?
Mm.
We in the media, because we're generally superficial, like, we treat it as if it's Jim Ratcliffe's club. It's not. He owns a minority. He's in charge of the football side. To operate in football, you need money, right? And who's in charge of the money side?
So we're back to the Glazers. Yeah.
They haven't gone away. And so when he gets to the big one, the Wembley of the North, rebuild Old Trafford, do all this, I kind of feel like, dude, you're a billionaire, right? We keep getting told all this thing, like you're worth 20 billion, whatever. Either you buy the whole club from the Glazers, and at the right price, they would have sold it to you. Or otherwise, don't pretend like you have all this autonomy and that the buck stops with you, because the reality, everything he's going to do that actually costs money, he's going to have to run past Joel and Avi Glazer. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, because the problem is that's exactly what he's doing right now. He's literally being that man that wants to say, "This, I'm in charge of the football operation. This is what I'm doing." I'm with you 100%. The buck stop with the Glazers, but if you are Sir Jim Ratcliffe and you're the one saying football operations, this is what I'm doing, this is what needs to happen, then something needs to happen. Some more synchronicity needs to happen, because right now it isn't. That's really the ultimate point here. So, when you look at United, a lot needs to be done.
Yeah, and you know what? Something about Ten Hag is forget about what's happening. Well, because we have to, for me to make that point, forget about what's happening with Manchester United outside of the club. How good Ten Hag is in his X's and O's. We've talked a lot about culture, haven't we? And I just wonder if there's a culture there where everybody, I'm talking about players, trust him. And that's a worry for me, because if you look at Wenger, if you look at Sir Alex Ferguson, he was tough. It doesn't mean that you have to be, Jurgen Klopp and give everybody hogs. LME, I worry about Unai Emery, right? Even though he said that he doesn't want to be friends with players. I just wonder if you lose 4 or 5 or 6 in a row, which can happen to them, how that's going to go, because he is demanding, right? So I look at all these personalities, and I think in order to have staying power, to build something big, players have to trust you at all times. And I worry about Ten Hag with that, because this team lost some games and show traits that are unbelievable for any club, never mind for Manchester United. We've seen how many games they've lost when they were leading. It was absolutely incredible. There's a certain level you can't go below, even if you have injuries, which, by the way, as Gab was saying, Manchester United had maybe as many or more than anybody else, just about. I get that. But there's a certain level you can't go behind it. And I worry about that. It doesn't matter who they get, but I don't know if I trust Ten Hag to be the sort of a manager that when things are, tough, everybody rallies around him. And I think it's just like, when you go to war, right? You have to trust your general. And I worry about that. Not X's and O's.
Speaking of managers, Gab, where's Roberto De Zerbi going to land?
Good question. He's certainly out there. I don't think he did his reputation too many favors. And I go back to, when he talked in March about like the project and needs to sit down with the club and everything and talk about the future. Talk about misreading the situation. Because I wanted to shake him. I want to say, dude, everybody loves you. You play phenomenal football. You're doing great. You've had this incredible amount of injuries, and Brighton for the first time having to compete in Europe and so on. And so in the end, you're taking hits in the league when, I think if everybody had stayed fit, I think Brighton would have probably finished top 6. In fact, without question, if everybody had stayed fit. Instead, they just lost a zillion games in a row at the end of the season. He took this attitude. He channeled his inner Antonio Conte. You can't do that with Brighton. You can't do that with Tony Bloom. And I think people look at this and say, all right, so if I get De Zerbi, what am I going to get? Am I going to get somebody who's going to maybe rock the boat a little bit? And why were Brighton so terrible late in the season? For me, he's still a phenomenal coach. I'd love to see him at the right club. I mean, we showed what he did last season. I think he's going to bide his time. I think he's going to apply for jobs. But I think some of what's come out of his camp, and again, I to some degree I'd put it on his agent and the people who look after him. I don't think it's necessarily going to help him. Like weirdly, I think like if he had left, say last summer, or if he'd left in December, I think he would be right up there in line for some of the top jobs that are open, like the Bayern job that of course he was linked to at some point along with everybody else. Now I'm not so sure. I think it could take a while.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Well,
where he goes next?
Just as a circus, I'd love him to go to United. I think it'd be incredible. Just as just as a neutral cinema goer, eating my popcorn and just watching what would happen. Because, and I'll tell you something, Yanis was talking about culture, and I totally agree. I mean, I would love to see the Serbian coming into Manchester United and see, right, this needs fixing. I need this. You can stop that right now. You, Harry, come here. I need to talk. Like, I would love to see that. I just want to see it. I want to see the chaos. Like, I just want to see that. But I think that Gab is correct, though. Last summer, the options would have been plentiful. This summer, I think he's going to be a little bit more methodic about where he wants to go. Maybe even back to his native Italy. I'm not sure. I just think that this time around it'll be a little bit different. But make no mistake about it, Roberto De Zerbi in the Premier League has been wonderful. So I hope he gets another good job that suits him once again.
Yeah,
Final say, Yanis?
Gab is right. The visual were not right, but I get him. I understand him. He's hit the ceiling. I mean, where are you going to go with Brighton? Even when everybody's healthy right now, I promise you, with all the healthy players right now, this league is what it is. Brighton aren't going to go anywhere. He knows that he's accomplished everything there is to be, and there's actually quite a few options this year in Europe, right? So it's a short thing. The trajectory that he's taken, it's pretty decent, and he's just taking his chances. So, and by the way, Gab, I think, there are some promises made in terms of before the season, what sort of players that he wanted and what Brighton were able to do for him. So I don't know if the visuals, though, I agree with you, aren't great, but I probably would have done the same thing.